We come on the air tonight with breaking news. The race for the White House is heating up massively tonight. Harris versus Trump. It is official. The vice president has secured enough delegate votes to become the Democratic nominee about 36 hours after the official virtual roll call began yesterday. She also picked up a major boost, adding the strategy masterminds of Barack Obama's winning campaigns to her staff. Meanwhile, Trump's campaign seems to be faltering just a little bit this week with reports of infighting among staffers. So can he hit the reset button? Thank you for joining us on what turned out to be a very busy Friday. I'm Elizabeth Pran in for Leland. First tonight, it is game on. We are 95 days out from the election. Kamala Harris is enjoying a meteoric rise in the polls. It's a much different trajectory than what we saw just a week ago with President Biden at the top of the ticket. She has money. She has momentum. It's a stark contrast to the former president, her opponent, who's trying really to extinguish a 5-alarm fire. His attacks on Harris are doing more harm than good, and his pick for vice president is falling a little bit flat right now with voters. The state of play tonight is abundantly clear. Harris is leading in 8 new national polls, a massive swing from the poll numbers that we saw when it was President Biden at the top of the ticket. Most notably, she's up 5 in a poll from Rasmussen, which is notoriously known for leaning to the right. Harris has also taken the lead in our DDHQ polling average in a 3-way matchup between her, former President Trump, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So part of that can be attributed to the effective messaging by Democrats. And it's quite simple. They're calling their opponents weird. Republicans still really haven't figured out an ample response.
Well, they're the weird ones, and if you've ever seen her with the laugh and everything else, that's a weird deal going on there. They're the weird ones. Nobody's ever called me weird.
If your attitude is that a happily married father of 3 is a weird guy, call me weird all you want. I'm happy to be who I am.
Seems to be a little bit sensitive. It's a sign that really the more simple the message is, the better. And I guess it seems to be sticking. Google searches of the word weird are up 22% over just the last week. I'm not sure who doesn't know what that means, but over the past 3 months, it's up 32%. And besides saying something a little bit childish, Trump is now blaming the search engine for his own struggles.
Google has been very bad. They've been very irresponsible. And I have a feeling that Google is going to be close to shutdown because I don't think Congress is going to take it. I really don't think so. Google has to be careful.
What do you think? Does Google need to be careful? A new damning report from Tara Palmieri at Puck News lays out what's happening, according to her, behind the scenes of a Trump campaign. Turmoil in Trump world inside Mar-a-Lago. The return of the 2016-style infighting is the latest symbol of a campaign on tilt, as an election that once felt like a layup devolves into a dogfight. She goes on to say, not that Trump himself is complaining at the unfairness of a new challenger, befuddled by his inability of his campaign to land a punch against Harris, furious at the suggestion proffered by his own team that her gains were inevitable, and annoyed that having to clean up J.D. Vance's messes. So Trump's campaign just sent out a memo vowing to unleash hell during a planned rally this weekend, tomorrow, in Atlanta. So there's still a ton of time for him to right the ship. We're talking about August. But heading into the weekend, Democrats feel strongly that it really could be Harris's race to lose. So we begin tonight with our A-team, Chris Hahn, NewsNation contributor and host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast, and Lauren Wright, associate research scholar at Princeton University. I am grateful for you both joining us tonight. All right, Chris, you've had a long day. I've seen you multiple times, but I do want to ask you, is this week a one-off, right? Are we talking about momentum because the announcement, or do you feel like this could be a plateau or she could even continue to rise? When we talk about what she's gaining, I mean, more than $300 million so far. That's not a small chunk of change.
I think she's going to continue to rise. I think there's a ceiling. Obviously, this country is very evenly divided. But here's the big change in the last 3 weeks. 3 weeks ago, this race was about Joe Biden. Today, this race is about Donald Trump, and the American people do not like Donald Trump. They didn't think Joe Biden could do the job, and that was a bigger problem than their concerns about Donald Trump. Now the focus is on Donald Trump, and they don't like him. He's saying that she's weird because she doesn't laugh. I think it's weird that he never laughs. And I think that the weird thing is actually sticking because people are paying attention to him now. They are not looking at Joe Biden and saying, oh, my God, the president can't get through a sentence. They're looking at Donald Trump and saying, I don't like that. And her campaign is not pushing back in a very defensive way, the way others have with Donald Trump. When Donald Trump questioned her race, she said, same old Donald. And the American people don't want to go back to that. Their strategy has been pitch perfect. Put the focus back on him every time he tries to kick it over to her.
All right, Lauren, I want to weave you into the conversation. I have heard this from a number of voters. They may not like him, but they may still vote for him. Hasn't had a great week, right? That's undeniable. He is unrestrained. It seems like he is a little bit defensive, but we are in August, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to stay this way. So can he right the ship?
He can, but it'll be tough for him. And look, one of the problems with what Chris is saying is the data show people really don't like Kamala Harris either. She is one of the only vice presidents in recent history to be less popular than the president of the United States. We haven't seen those kind of approval numbers since Dick Cheney was blamed for the war on terror, and he was less popular than Bush for a few months. And so when she is examined, when she's under the microscope, when she's in these really high publicity, high attention scenarios, she also tends to make mistakes. And I'm not saying Trump can't shoot himself in the foot. He does it over and over again. But people this year want a reason, I agree with you, Chris, to vote for Republicans. Moderate Republicans want a reason to come home. They don't want to vote for, what they see as an extension of Joe Biden's failing administration. But Trump with the personal attacks just drives them away. And so if he could find a way to be the unity candidate he said he was going to and focus on policies, then he would be righting the ship. But I don't know if he can do that. It really remains to be seen.
Okay, Lauren, I want to stay with you, but I also want to play. There's been a lot of reaction. A lot of people who are usually as cheerleaders, right, saying, it's been a tough week. So listen here, and then I want to get your reaction.
She hasn't done a single interview since she's been the nominee. She hasn't done a real interview since May. You haven't answered anything. You haven't been asked about your flip-flops. You haven't been asked about your cover-ups. You haven't been asked who you are. And she could get away with it.
How does she get away with that? It's kind of like Joe hiding in his basement in 2020.
She's not very strong when she's off the cuff, when she's not reading from a teleprompter, when she is in these high-profile interviews.
Yep. Okay, that was my fault, you guys. I tossed to the wrong soundbite, but this one actually is where I was going with it, and it's about the flip-flopping. So, Lauren, I'm gonna let you respond after I get this from Chris. All right, Chris, so just because she's human, right? I mean, this happens during a campaign.
Look, everybody makes mistakes. And again, if this campaign is about her mistakes, that'll be a problem for her. But as Lauren correctly points out, Trump is incapable of allowing this election to be about anything else but his own petty grievances. It's the same old nonsense that we expect from this guy, that we've seen, and the American people are tired of it. And Lauren is right. There are moderates in this country that would much rather vote for a Republican, but they don't want to vote for Trump. And Trump has given them no reason to vote for him. He calms them down at no point, even at his convention. If he would have gotten off the stage 10 minutes after his speech started, maybe he would have convinced some people. The man got no bounce out of his convention. He's got a little bit of a bounce from being shot, but that bounce is even going away. So I don't see any way possible for Donald Trump to stay quiet for the next 95 days. It's not going to happen.
Well, Lauren, at the same time, if we talk about her flip-flopping, I mean, why doesn't he capitalize then and stick to the issues?
Well, because he's Donald Trump and he doesn't really like to do that. And look, I'm not going to minimize the assassination attempt. I actually think that was a unifying moment for the country. I think a lot of people of all political stripes were impressed by his show of defiance and how he handled himself in that terrifying moment. And nobody likes to see political violence in the country. And I do think he won some people over with how he acted in the wake of that. But now we move on, and we just have to see if he can stop attacking Harris personally and go to her failures. You know, as a senator from a border state, as an AG from a border state, there's no excuse for why she can't have a successful interview on immigration. She should be able to answer those questions easily. It's insulting to her to suggest that she has been somehow saddled by the administration with these tough issues. She's been hidden away. It's absolutely not true. She's been historically active. She's given more public appearances than any vice president in recent history. It just seems to be the case that when people see her, she makes some mistakes and she does drive people away. She's very capable. She's totally qualified, and she should be asked tough questions.
Well, she
Chris,
hasn't been making mistakes
I do want to ask
in the last 3 weeks. She's been,
she hasn't.
She's been
but
very
Chris, she
nimble
hasn't been making mistakes because
at the top of the ticket.
Well, I'd like to see a press
nimble,
conference.
but in what sense,
we'll
Chris?
See.
Look, I mean, the responses to Trump's beratement of her have been fantastic. Her introduction on the campaign trail has been fantastic. Her quick unification of the Democratic Party is the reason why she's got this lead in the polls, right? The coalition that didn't want Trump 4 years ago is getting back together. Look, give her some time. She'll be president on January 20th. I'll bring you with me. Lauren, you're one of my good friends. You could come to the inauguration. and it'll be a fun time. I'll bring you too, Elizabeth. You will all be there, probably with media badges on anyway. But it's going to happen if things keep going in this direction and if Trump doesn't learn. But here's the thing about a 79-year-old man. They don't change who they are, right? He's an old guy who's got old ways and is still living in the 1970s, frankly. And he's not going to change between now and November in a significant way that's going to help him. He was smart to be quiet after the debate, and it drove him nuts. He's not going to be quiet anymore, and that is the problem, not only for Trump, but for every Republican running in a close race in this country.
All right. Well, I'm grateful that you both joined us. I will say that her travel schedule is quite daunting. There'll be a lot of opportunities, so we are going to see next week if she maybe does have some more off-the-cuff comments. So, Chris and Lauren, thank you so much for joining us. It's really interesting. We're in the thick of it, so I'm grateful for you both joining us tonight. All right, so even a lot of Republicans are having a little bit of trouble with Trump's attack on Kamala Harris 48 hours after focusing on her race and identity. So does it look like a winning strategy? What do you think?
She is not a smart person. She's not a smart person. If you look back 5 weeks ago, before this whole thing happened, where, it's a coup of Joe Biden, and all of a sudden the media says, well, we're stuck with her, so now we're going to make her smart.
And American drugstores appear to be disappearing. So what and who is behind the blame for the brick and mortar ghost town?
Up. That gets us nowhere. Women, when they hear that crap, are resentful, particularly of old white men pulling that crap. Shut up.
Ooh, shots fired. And from an unsuspecting source, Peter Navarro, one of Donald Trump's most loyal supporters, even serving time behind bars for crimes related to his past administration, is now having doubts about the state of the campaign right now in August. It all stems from Trump's decision to question Kamala Harris's racial identity. Remember earlier in the week, he was at the National Association of Black Journalists, and as Leland pointed out, the former president's comments really appear to have been a calculated, perhaps a strategy, perhaps an attempt to distract from her campaign's momentum. And Navarro is not the only conservative who is speaking out this week.
Donald Trump blew it, and the happiest person in the country tonight is Kamala Harris. Because she's sitting there cackling, look at this Yeah, look at this. Look at Trump. He's just alienated millions of black voters.
He did crap the bed today. The only question is whether he's going to roll around in it or get up and change his sheets.
I also don't think that it's a winning issue to bring up Kamala Harris, Indian, black. It doesn't matter.
I do believe that we need a bit of a reset in this campaign. If we're being honest and being clear-eyed.
Caroline Sunshine is with us. She is the Deputy Director of Communications for the Trump's campaign. All right, Caroline, elephant in the room. What do you think? Is he wrong? Are they all wrong?
Well, I think what you're watching actually is another textbook case of how the media can see something really differently than how the average American sees it. So President Trump yesterday was attending the National Association of Black Journalists event, an event that I might add that Kamala Harris chose not to attend. She said she had a scheduling conflict, and that scheduling conflict was lunch with the president. That's not really the definition of a scheduling conflict. She could have been there if she wanted to be, but she didn't want to take tough questions. What President Trump was pointing out was actually just what the media used to cover. I could give you any number of headlines. I could give you the Sacramento Bee headline that said Kamala Harris was praised as the first Indian American Attorney General. I could give you the headline from Business Insider saying Kamala Harris praised as the first Indian American senator. And what President Trump was pointing out was that she used to embrace a certain side of her identity, and now she's really shapeshifted. We saw her on stage in Atlanta speaking a little differently than I think Kamala Harris usually speaks. And what he was pointing out was that she's a chameleon. She's pandering. She's doing what politicians do. And what politicians do is they shapeshift to be whatever they think you want in front of whatever given audience they want. And that's what Kamala Harris does. And she doesn't just shapeshift on her identity. She shapeshifts on her policies. And she has a media that allows her to do it. As President Trump said in Pennsylvania, it's really fake, fake, fake versus fight, fight, fight. You know, you watch Kamala Harris shapeshift on every given policy position she's practically had. She used to say that she was all for banning fracking once and for all. Now she's saying a very different tune. She used to say she'd like to defund ICE. Now she's back to saying she would like credit for being the border czar, has a very different policy on the border now. Her comments, the media refuses to cover about how, you know, Americans ages 18 to 24 are stupid, or, you know, North Korea is a valuable ally of the United States. So President Trump was just pointing out that she's shapeshifting and she's doing what politicians do and why the American people don't trust politicians. I think Kamala Harris is a better actress than candidate for president.
Right, and we've certainly heard a lot of criticism about the flipping on issues compared to what she was running as what at that point was a fairly progressive vice president, right? I do want to ask you though, from a campaign standpoint, we have heard people say, okay, let's get to the policy then. Let's get to the debate stage. I want to play a bit of sound for you. This is with Fox Business, and the former president responded on whether or not he would be attending a debate. Here he is, and then I'll get your response, Caroline.
I mean, right now I say, why should I do a debate? I'm leading in the polls. And everybody knows her. Everybody knows me. She wants open borders. She wants a weak military. She wants high taxes.
So from a voter perspective, what if I do want to see him on stage? What if I want to see the optics of the two of them? Why not say, let's do it?
Yeah, well, actually, you heard President Trump yesterday say challenge accepted, and that he would be happy to put up his record against Kamala Harris is actually point by point. That's actually what President Trump said. Look, we can't get away from this.
Well, he said that, but I do want to interrupt you, and I respectfully want to interrupt you because this was from this morning. So that did change overnight, did it not?
Well, what's changing is that the Democrat Party is trying to think that by changing their candidate, they can change the reality that the American people are facing. And that's why President Trump said he'd be happy to put up his record against Kamala Harris's point by point, or any candidate the Democrat Party selects, to be clear. But where I want to make sure I'm being very clear about this is, look, 3 weeks ago, President Trump debated Joe Biden, and it was such a dominant debate performance that the Democrat nominee for president and sitting U.S. president had to drop out of the race. That is unprecedented in American political history, that a debate performance could be so defining that it results in the nominee having to drop out. And now we're in this situation where the Democrat Party is really a ship without a captain, and through selection versus election, and I know the liberal mainstream media has said, well, people voted for Kamala Harris in the past because she was part of the Biden-Harris ticket. Not so. Kamala Harris on her own, when she ran for president just 4 years ago, couldn't crack 2% in her own party's primary. She couldn't make it out of Iowa. There's a reason for that. Her own party rejected her. Now we're watching really selection versus election, Democrat Party bosses, the DNC, mainstream media coming together to really select, not elect her. And it's just disrespectful. It's disrespectful to the Democrat Party voters to not allow them to have a say into it and to want to rush into a debate. So that's why we're in the situation that we're in. But President Trump's words stand that he'd be happy to put his record up against hers or whoever ends up being the Democrat nominee. If it's likely to be Kamala Harris, be happy to put his record up against hers point by point.
Well, we're grateful that you joined us tonight. A busy week for her. She's got a number of states that she's visiting with whoever she chooses to be the vice president. So we will see the response from former President Donald Trump, and we are grateful that you joined us. And, of course, we do anticipate seeing them on the debate stage together eventually. Caroline, thank you so much. Appreciate you. Rumors abound, and it's looking more and more likely that the road to the White House will run through the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, perhaps in more ways than one.
I'll say this about J.D. Vance. It is real hard being honest with the American people when you're not being honest with yourself. Guy is not exactly off to a good start. And it is clear that Donald Trump really has buyer's remorse with his pick. So if he wants to sling insults in my direction, which I'm not even sure is an insult, let him do it. That's fine. Bring it on. I'll be ready for whatever the hell J.D. Vance throws my direction. Thanks, everybody.
Did you catch that last part? I'll be ready for whatever the hell J.D. Vance throws in my direction. What do you think? That was Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro speaking at an event in Philadelphia. I mean, what's your take? Does he know something that we don't? Was it tongue-in-cheek? I mean, it sounds a little bit like he might have the job. Kamala Harris is set to begin campaigning with her pick for vice president next week. She's making the first stop in Pennsylvania on Tuesday. The coincidence? What do you think? So Harris continues to lead former President Donald Trump by 4 points in the state of Pennsylvania, which is worth, by the way, a whopping 19 electoral votes, right? They always say maybe the road to the White House goes through Pennsylvania. It almost seems like the only thing she's missing is a popular Pennsylvania governor to boost her chances of maybe taking the state. So our next guest was appointed by Governor Josh Shapiro to be commissioner of Pennsylvania. She's also a senior advisor to the DNC. Lindy Lee joins me now. Lindy, I'm grateful for you. You are the perfect person to speak to about this, right? So your take on the role that he would play as vice president, right? If we look back at the now Vice President Harris, she was a little bit more progressive than President Biden back in 2019 during her campaign. What do you feel about the governor? Does he compliment her?
Thank you so much for having me. I absolutely think he does. He's demonstrated on a national level his capacity for leadership. If you remember last year, we had the I-95 collapse, and the way that he handled that infrastructure crisis became a national model for how to handle such things. Wes Moore, I think, is emulating how Shapiro handled this. He fixed that highway collapse in 10 days. In 10 days. It's unheard of in American infrastructure. And he had a live stream going, and then we had a parade with the Philly Fanatic. It was just a master class in how to handle this. And I've known him for 10 years. He's been an incredible leader and just a fantastic friend. I am rarely, let's be honest, I'm rarely enthralled when politicians speak. But when Josh comes on the stage, it's just electrifying. And I find myself almost taking notes on like how to do things better myself. He's just a supremely talented politician.
You know, it's funny you should say that, and you're setting me up. We have a quick piece of sound from The Daily Show, and it was comparison of maybe reminiscent of former President Obama. So listen to this sound, and then I want to get your reaction, Lindy.
I saw that.
I know I'm a foreigner who can't understand English, but just listen to this guy speak, because, I mean, is he doing an Obama?
Now let me tell you something. He's pretty afraid. Y'all see, he's backing out of the debate now. He's afraid to stand toe-to-toe with our vice president. It's because he can't run away from his record any longer.
Okay, that's not just me, right?
I mean, Lindy, this is also on the heels of the fact that we're seeing some former campaign staffers that are getting hired by the Harris team. I mean, is that a coincidence?
Well, the Obama model works. And as Governor Shapiro just said this afternoon, comparing him to Obama isn't exactly an insult. I think that would be with the highest of compliments. And I've actually spoken to President Obama about Josh, and I know how Obama feels about him. Obama thinks the world of Josh, as he does. Josh is just like a once-in-a-generation talent. And I've seen this firsthand. You know, I was running for Congress at age 24, didn't know anybody. I cold emailed Josh 10 years ago, and he responded. I was 30 minutes late, and he still agreed to meet with me. And ever since that day, he and I have been friends. It's just a testament to his character that he was willing to spend time with essential nobody out of nowhere and to give her advice. It meant a lot to me, and, you know, it stayed with me ever since.
All right. Well, Lindy, I think I know your answer. In the interest of time, yes or no answer, is he ready for this big national stage? I mean, I know he's a governor of one of the most important states, but is he ready?
I think he was born for this, literally. I think he's been wanting this for his entire life, and he deserves it. He's demonstrated tremendous leadership potential in every level, from Montgomery County Commissioner to Attorney General of Pennsylvania, and now to governor. And he has a 61% approval rating. That's unheard of nowadays, given the polarized state of things.
Right. Well, let's see. All right, Lindy Lee, thank you so much. You know, it's our job to bring folks this personal side of these folks that we might be looking at every day. So thank you for joining us. Switching gears now, we've reported a lot about the challenges facing, Main Street in this economy in Pennsylvania and all across the United States. Drugstores in particular are really struggling in 2024. Walgreens is in the process of closing up to 9,000 of its stores nationwide. The struggles are in part related to thefts tied to the country's ongoing opioid epidemic, and shoppers may be changing their habits for good. So what does that mean for pharmacy? Axios reports that Amazon.com has noticed a jump in drugstore and pharmacy products. Shoppers are going online rather than making the trip to a CVS or a Walgreens. Amazon CEO says, quote, pharmacy shopping is a pretty tough experience with how much is locked behind cabinets where you have to press a button to get someone to come out and open the cabinets for you. And shoplifting is going on in the stores. So let's talk to Mitch Rochelle. He joins me now, a visiting research fellow at the University of San Diego School of Business. Thank you so much for joining us. All right. So is this a combination of things where we are seeing perhaps that people are just going online more now than ever?
Well, I think the convenience of going online isn't something new, Elizabeth, but the fact of the matter is the inconvenience. I went with my son the other day. He moved into a new apartment. There's a Target across the street. He had to pick up a couple of items, and he said, Dad, I want to pick up deodorant. And we waited for about 10 minutes for somebody to show up in front of the locked case to get deodorant. And if you think about the depravity of it, the thing that they're stealing is deodorant. Then he went on to say, we probably need detergent for the dishwasher. That was locked up. These are essential items. And the thing to remember is the operating model for the Targets, the Walgreens, the Walmarts is people go in for that one item and end up walking out with 10. Now they're not going in for that one item. So it's not just the loss of the sale of the deodorant. It's the loss of the other 9 items that people aren't going in for because they didn't go into the store in the first place.
Okay, old habits die hard, so I'll admit that I'm still someone who goes to the local pharmacy. Now, that being said, could it also be the fact that we're in an election cycle, maybe people are dialing back some of their spending habits, there's some things unknown? Or do you think it's more clear than that? Do you think it's the fact that people are dissuaded by the plexiglass cases? Or maybe they've seen a theft and they're saying, I'm not going to do it. Are we really beginning to see the end of brick and mortar?
No, I don't think we're seeing the end of brick and mortar. I think the disruption of online retail on brick and mortar is something that ship has sort of sailed. We're seeing a new disruption because when you walk into, inner city, urban area, retail, it's not only the plexiglass that you see, it's the 4, armed guards that you see also. So it's just not an inviting atmosphere. And the easy, pick up the phone my screen just locked, but I could illustrate. I was literally going to buy deodorant online in front of you. That's just literally how easy it's gotten. But I don't think, to answer your question, that brick and mortar is dead by any stretch of the imagination. One of the reasons why we're seeing store closings in cities is because there's less office workers in those cities because of this disruption from remote work. So people aren't going to the CVS. The building that I worked in for 30 years in Midtown Manhattan used to have a CVS next door. It's gone. It's not gone because of theft. It's gone because there's a lot less foot traffic in Midtown Manhattan or inside the Loop in Chicago, or you pick your high traffic office area.
Yeah, I mean, it's also just convenience, right, Mitch? I mean, I have 3 kids going back to school this week, and I remember as a kid we'd go back to school shopping, and now we do it online, right? It's just a different world that we grew up in. But I'm grateful for you joining us, so we'll see how the future looks. Appreciate you.
You bet. Good.
Speaking of how the future look, what does Harris's new command of the stage say to voters? Could there be things about J.D. Vance's media appearances that are rubbing folks the wrong way? We're going to talk body language coming up after the break.
We were walking our dog. We were a really big dog, a German Shepherd. And, the dog, goes to the bathroom like dogs do. And I look back at the agent who was on the detail, and I'm like, is this the sort of thing you're meant to protect me from? And her eyes got real big, like, is he really asking me to pick up dog right now?
Attack black journalists, calling them a loser, saying the questions that they ask are, quote, stupid and racist. You've had dinner with a white supremacist at your Mar-a-Lago resort. So my question, sir, now that you are asking black supporters to vote for you, why should black voters trust you after you have used language like that?
Well, first of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question in such a horrible manner. First question. You don't even say, hello, how are you?
All right, we know you've heard it, right? But did you take a close look at the hands, the pursing of the lips, how the former president was sitting, the position of his hands, the body language of the reporter on Wednesday at the National Association of Black Journalists? Things got heated right out of the gate. We just played you the sound. But let's bring in what isn't being said, the quiet parts. Body language expert Tanya Ryman is here. Tanya, I'm grateful that you're here because it's always the saying, it's not what you say, it's how you make people feel, right? So Let's break down some of the body language here with former President Trump. You saw him there, you saw his hands in between his legs, you see him taking some sips of water bottle, out of a water bottle if you watch the whole interview. What are you seeing when you see the former? Is he defensive?
He's deflecting. He always deflects and pivots to a different idea, concept. But here, what you notice is he starts to really change his demeanor after she asks a specific question. So he's in what's known as a steeple position right now, downward, and then he gets uncomfortable. You see this? This is tapping out to get rid of the energy. He then folds his hands and he looks down, purses his lips, which is pretty much his normal baseline behavior. And really people do that when they're trying to prepare their next sentence. The only difference you see is when he actually does this. So this is a gesture that closes off people. So if I do this to you, if you're standing in front of me and I suddenly do this, that means I'm just closing off my body language to you.
Okay, so maybe sort of a fight or flight. But speaking of flight, I was in Atlanta with the vice president, and she had a rally. And it was quite the crowd, a ton of energy. I want to play a piece of sound and get your reaction.
Well, Donald, I do hope you'll reconsider to meet me on the debate stage. Because as the saying goes, if you've got something to say,
you see her hands on the podium. I was there. She felt confident. She felt like she was a prosecutor up there. Is that your interpretation when you look at her body language, her pacing, her confidence?
I've been watching her for years, obviously. So she does one thing that I would typically say would be a vulnerable gesture when she goes, if you have something to say, and she kind of tucks her neck, that's typically seen as vulnerable. But with Kamala Harris, we know that that's pretty much her baseline as well. So when you see her doing it, it's more like street talk, like she's daring him. So here she was being herself, her natural personality, and holding on to the podium as natural. She didn't do anything that was out of sync. As a matter of fact, I did think she looked very confident here, as opposed to when I've seen her in other clips.
All right, Tanya, that's all the time we have. It's very, very interesting. Like I said, we see these candidates a lot, and there's a lot of things that we're interpreting. It's not necessarily always what they're saying. So thank you for helping us break it down.
Thank you.
We keep asking, or what you as well, when or if Kamala Harris will sit down to take questions from journalists. But maybe the real question is, does she even have to? Welcome back. We started the show by saying Kamala Harris's rise is real. She has money pouring in, upwards of $300 million, momentum thrusting her into the spotlight, especially on social media, and a travel schedule for the ages next week. I get tired just looking at it. One could argue that Republicans right now may not have a clear and a concise response. To be fair, she does have critics who argue she might be dodging reporters.
Kamala Harris has been put in bubble wrap by her campaign and the mainstream media. She's not even done a press event since she became the presumptive Democrat nominee.
She's going to have to answer to the voters at some point. She can't continue to just read off of a teleprompter and have her campaign officials feed these lies to the press. She's going to have to do an unscripted interview.
They're hiding Harris just like they were hiding Biden. Kamala Harris hasn't done a single interview since Biden stepped down. And the media is fine with it.
All right. Colby Hall is here, founding editor at Mediaite, also a NewsNation contributor. All right, Colby, bubble wrap, hiding from reporters has to come out eventually. Are we being a little bit too harsh? Is it a little bit too early?
Well, I think there's room for reasonable criticism that she's not done an interview. But I will say that she was shoehorned into this role like 12 days ago in a way that I think she benefited from. She hasn't had time to be scripted. And so she's been busy like interviewing vice presidential candidates and getting her campaign together. She's been doing rallies. She's not in the basement like Biden was alleged to have done in the 2020 election. So she's out there. But yeah, I mean, at some point she's going to have to do a hardcore news interview. So I think that's fair criticism from, right-sided opinion people who are looking to criticize her.
But if it's not broken, we're talking $300 million. Just in 1 week, I think she had like 170,000 volunteers sign up. If anything, shouldn't she just ride this as long as she can?
There's no question she's enjoying a good time. I think that her first 12 days since she formally came out as the nominee have gone as well or better than anyone on the Democratic side could have possibly imagined. I will say also, why borrow trouble? Why throw a long bomb pass when you're up or you're advancing the ball and risk interception? And, she has sort of, in the past, sort of fallen prey to word salads. I will say she's been pretty disciplined so far. The other thing I'd say is that former President Trump hasn't done a proper news interview either in 14 months, I think, since Brett interviewed him on Fox News. He's available to a lot of press, and he sits down with Fox News hosts who are very sympathetic to him. But no one's really asked him tough questions apart from the NABJ thing that he did last Wednesday, which I give him credit for.
I want to play a soundbite, Lester. We watched her, right, last night. She was greeting the men and women back from Russia. And there was a little bit of criticism, and I want to get your take on it, because if you only speak off the cuff so many times, it's going to get dissected. So here it is. Listen.
This is just an extraordinary testament to the importance of having a president who understands the power of diplomacy and understands the strength that rests in understanding the significance of diplomacy.
Her plan next week, Colby, which it is for any candidate, right? It is intense. multiple states and multiple days of travel. She could get tired. She could speak off the cuff. She could make mistakes. I mean, next week's going to be quite telling, no?
Totally. And by the way, that soundbite made total sense to me. It was brief, and I saw people, there's so much confirmation bias. There was people if you don't respect her speaking, you see her in the worst possible way. I didn't think that was bad. I didn't think it was particularly strong either. But Kamala Harris benefits for a schedule in the next 2 or 3 weeks really suits her, because she's going to get a ton of news and pop from, the announcement of her vice presidential candidate on Tuesday, and then cut to another, I think, week and a half after that, the DNC. And so, you couldn't have scripted this better for her to slot in. And again, I think the fact that she wasn't overly scripted and has come out just sort of like extemporaneous, and, following Biden, whose cognitive decline has made it really tough to watch, she seems so absurdly articulate in comparison with such a low bar. So, yeah, inevitably, Trump and the Republicans will figure out their attack, and this thing will even up. But she's not doing an interview because why does she want to borrow trouble? Why does she want to, make bad things are going so well for her?
And we're probably not going to be having this conversation, right, in October, right? She will eventually sit down with someone. News of the week, right? We talked about her rollout with this vice president. I mean, let's compare it. Is it apples to oranges that we saw with former President Trump and J.D. Vance? Is she handling it correctly? What does she have to do over the next 7 days to keep this momentum going?
Yeah, I think she's playing it safe. Again, she's being disciplined. I think, what we're seeing, this honeymoon in the media, is real, but it's also like the shiny new toy. It's a shiny new toy, and the novelty is going to wear off at some point.
Well, and we saw that we saw that with the Republicans as well. So thank you so much for joining us, Colby. We are grateful for you. A really, really interesting conversation. And we thank you at home for joining us on a Friday night. We hope you have a lovely weekend ahead with your family. In the meantime, Chris Cuomo starts right now.